Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. I'm a contributor at Forbes covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And today's guest is a fantastic social entrepreneur from, working in India. Our guest is Damian Miller, who is the CEO and founder of Orb Energy. Damian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
We're thrilled to have you, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us all the way from India. So give us a quick overview of Orb Energy.
Yeah, so we set up in India about 8 years ago. We are a provider of solar energy solutions to both residential and commercial customers. We like to go to market as directly as we can. We have about 140 of our own branches. We're very keen on making sure that the customer gets a good quality installation and especially has good after-sales service. That's something that historically has been lacking for a lot of rural customers in particular who bought solar in India.
So what do you see as being the problem that you're addressing there in India?
I think there's three sets. It's in our mission. You know, as a company, our mission is to make solar affordable, accessible, and hassle-free for the customer. And I think those are three very significant barriers to people adopting solar. One is it affordable? Often that takes financing to make it affordable. Is it accessible? Do they have a place where they know they can turn to find a good quality solution? And is it hassle-free? i.e., is it installed well and is it serviced well? And I think if you address those three barriers, then you're going to go a long way to sort of driving solar forward.
One of the interesting aspects of the program that you're running seems to me that you're sort of doing everything from solar lanterns for the poorest citizens all the way up to institutional installations of solar for businesses. Am I kind of getting a sense of what you're doing correctly?
That's correct. We have products that are suited more to the bottom of the pyramid, and we have our business that is also suited to residential, more middle-class customers, and then we work with commercial customers as well. I think key for us in India has always been having a diversified approach. There's lots of risks in the market, not least regulatory risks, and it helps a lot if you're diversified into, you can't be in everything, but it does help your business if you have some diversification.
You even have a little bit of wind that you're doing as well.
Yeah, that's we do. Whenever somebody says, you know what, I live in a pretty windy home, could I couple a wind generator, a small micro wind turbine with my solar system? We say sure. And that's part of being a solar energy solutions provider. We want to make sure the customer is getting the solution they want.
This is really great stuff. It's interesting when we think about solar in the developing world, we often think about the needs of the very poor and their need to have light in the evening when the sun goes down. But the fact is the environment is being shredded by people who have far greater means.
Yep.
Who are buying electricity off the grid that's being generated by inefficient, relatively expensive, and certainly environmentally hazardous coal-fired plants. And so by moving upscale, you really seem to me to be able to have the potential to have far greater environmental impact as you serve those upscale clients.
Yeah, and that's a big part of our mission. We have a social mission. We also have an environmental mission, and that's very much driven by myself personally, based on my own personal values, my upbringing, and I think it's been obvious to me for a long time that while part of the solution to climate change issues, of course, lies with the developed countries, there's no question that India and China were going to come on steam really fast, and the earlier that those countries can make a switch to solar, the better. And I think to India and China's credit, the governments have realized that now. And in India, there is a mission to get 100 gigawatts of solar installed by 2022. 100 gigawatts, just to put that in perspective, is probably about 20% of India's entire grid by 2022. So, we want to be part of that solution that is now unfolding. And I've always wanted to be part of that solution.
Where will that come from? Will that be installations of millions of low-cost individual home systems, or is that going to be mostly business scale, or will that be utility scale projects, or a combination of the three? But which is where does the bulk of that 120 gigawatts come from?
Well, it's 100 gigawatts by 2022, and it's the government's targets are 40% rooftop, as they call it. So rooftop can be residential and commercial. The other 60% they see coming from utility scale, so large solar farms.
And are you playing in the solar farm arena at all, or only in the rooftop?
Yeah, we feel that our roots are as a distributed solar company. We started very much in rural India with distributed solar, and we think we built on that core strength, and now we are, of course, serving cities and towns as well. And I think there's plenty to be done amongst residential and commercial rooftops, where frankly it's not quite as complex from a regulatory and an approvals point of view. If you want to get into utility solar in India, someone once said to me, you need to jump through about 70 different approvals before you'll get your plant up and running. Now, those were early days. I'm not sure if it's still the case, but there's a lot that you need to navigate. And I'd much rather, as much as possible, be dealing directly with our customers and being able to install the system fairly efficiently and quickly, and then moving on to the next.
It seems to me that 40 gigawatt piece, that marketplace that you're playing in, is an enormous marketplace. That probably represents, you can do the math, but it would be many billions of dollars of installations of solar, right?
Yeah, it would. It would be, well, let's see. If you take 1 megawatt, you're talking about, at least in India, you're talking about, it's $1 a watt now, so that's $1 million. So 1,000 is a billion. So it's a 40 billion. It's a $40 billion market, sure.
Yeah. So if you get a chunk of that, you'd have a nice little business going for you.
Yeah, that's right, and that's very much our intention. I mean, just to give you an idea, we think we will do this year probably 5 megawatts. Now in the and out of 40 gigawatts, that's nothing. We see so much more scope to scale. We hope over the next 3 years we'll do 100 megawatts. Still, out of 40 gigawatts, it's small. So we see ourselves as grabbing a big chunk, but the market is much bigger than what we are too.
There are all these tremendous opportunities in such a rapidly growing space. Clearly, that must attract investors. Have you raised all the money you need to raise to tackle that market, to reach the scale you have the potential to reach?
No, we haven't. No, we have not. We've raised about $6.5 million, mostly to date from social impact investors, such as Acumen or Bamboo or FMO. And it's been enormously helpful. But we're at the stage now where we really need to raise a bit more serious commercial money. And we're looking at this stage to raise, if things go right, 15 to 20 million would be great. And I think that's the kind of the next stage of funding that we're seeking now. And not least because I think, as I mentioned, we want to get into not just providing the solution itself, but also getting into the financing of some of those solutions for our commercial clients. Once you get into that space, it's much more capital intensive, both equity and debt. And so we feel that we need to move in that direction, just like it's moved in the US.
Now, as you look at that 2020 goal, let's presume for a minute that goal is reached. Do you think that the percentage of power coming from solar and other renewables can continue to increase as a percentage after that point? Do you think, in other words, that the bulk of new power will come from those renewable sources rather than from traditional coal?
I think it's very exciting what's happening in India right now. So that even, just setting aside 2020, just right now, what we see is that in about 6 states in India, the cost of power produced on a rooftop is significantly less than what you would pay the utility on a per kilowatt hour basis. So for example, most commercial customers in our state of Karnataka, where I'm based in Bangalore, will pay about 8.5 rupees per kilowatt hour. If we take the 20-year levelized cost of solar now, we're at the cost that we're installing, and just to be clear, we're really in best-in-class costs in India now in terms of commercial installations. We're down to less than $1 a watt for an installed system. If you look at the US, it's more like 1.5 or 1.7. So in India, you know, India is extremely good at taking the costs out of things, and we've really taken the costs out of these systems. It's down to less than $1 a watt. That means the levelized cost of solar over 20 years is just 4.5 rupees. So 4.5 rupees compared to 8.5 rupees is such a clear advantage for people now just to go with solar. Forget feed into the grid or anything, just put it on your rooftop and use it while the sun is up from 9 to 5, while your business is open from 9 to 5, and displace grid electricity. So in India, in about 6 states, we've reached the tipping point where solar is cheaper than the grid. And I think over the next 5 years, you're going to find that electricity rates across all of India continue to go up because historically they've been subsidized quite heavily, and it'll be part of the process of making the utilities stronger. And I think we're going to see solar PV costs continue to go down as the manufacturers continue to scale. I think it's inevitable that most of the installed power that's going to come post-2022 will continue to come from solar well into the 2050 or 2060. Theoretically, India, according to the analysis, could have 60 to 70% of its energy coming from solar by 2050.
That's really remarkable, but it comes from, they will be adding tremendous amounts of capacity because their economy is expected to grow and their demand for energy is expected to grow. Not entirely because they're decommissioning coal power, which is kind of what needs to happen in the US, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you look, I mean, it may be that solar becomes so much cheaper than coal at some point that it does make sense to decommission. So we'll watch that space and see. You know, but you're right to say that's probably, in the end, what needs to happen for the climate is by 2050 that an awful lot of fossil fuel power plants come offline.
Yeah. Well, very exciting to see what you're doing. Can I just take a few minutes with you, Damian, and ask you a couple of personal questions?
Sure.
You really, as you achieve success, become really an icon and a role model to a lot of people. But I wonder who you look to as a role model and not an icon for yourself. Who inspires you?
Yeah. You know, that's, it's actually, it's, of course, in one way, it's a difficult question because there's many people, but in another way, it's an easy question. So in my case, I had two, like we all do, I had two grandfathers, and both of them fought in World War II. One was American and one was British. So I'm a dual national, half my family's British, half is American. And my father's father on the American side was involved in D-Day. And he made it onto Omaha Beach. He got past Omaha Beach. Sadly, he was killed once he was in France. My grandfather, who was English, was fought under Monty in North Africa, and I remember talking to him about his experiences that he also got shot. He was shot while being shot at. And I asked him at that moment, you know, as I was quite young, I said, "Were you afraid?" And he said, not in a boastful way, and not in a sort of gloating way. He just said, "No, it was either me or it was him." And I feel like there was a certain matter-of-factness to these men who put their lives on the line in the most dangerous environments you can imagine, from which I often, in my day-to-day, which is obviously far less dangerous, draw a certain amount of inspiration. I think life generally demands courage of us, and I think when I need a little bit of courage, I think about that.
That's great. Really, I think there is so much courage needed in all of our lives to do the right things, to do the hard things, and that's a great story to inspire us all to do a little better. Damian, you have become, tremendously successful. You're already achieving great scale, and Acumen and others have recognized that accomplishment by virtue of their investments and other recognitions you've received. I'm wondering if there is, if you can tell us why you're doing this when you could be doing almost anything.
Yeah, I think we all, there are different causes in the world at different times when all of us are coming of age. And when I was coming of age in university, there was very much the environmental cause was strong. And with me personally, I'd been raised by a mother who was extremely environmentally conscious, and I think she formed my consciousness from a young age. We still joke to this day about the fact how when I was a child, and I'd go to school with my lunchbox in New York City, and I'd open it up and I'd have recycled plastic bags in there from the supermarket, whereas all the other kids had some fancy Ziploc bags. And it wasn't, this is just very anecdotal, but what I would say, my mom, come on, can I have a normal Ziploc bag? She said, well, you know what, there's enough plastic in the environment already. I'm sure you can live with this. And this was in the early 70s. There wasn't a lot of recycling going on. I think these kind of things shape my environmental consciousness. And I think it was almost inevitable that once I started to think harder about my life and what I wanted to do, and university is a good time to do that, and climate change was very much coming on the environmental agenda in the early 90s, it was clear that that was a place that I wanted to work in. And then once you looked hard at climate change, I think I said this a bit earlier, it was inevitable that you also see that unless there's a solution, not just in the developed world, but in the developing world, there is no climate fix without bringing the developing world along. And so I think from that time on, that's where I wanted to work, and I feel privileged and lucky in many ways to have been able to realize that dream and to be working in this space.
Yeah. Damian, we're really grateful that you would take the time to be with us today, and really appreciate it. Would you just take a minute and tell people how they can connect with you and learn more about the work that you're doing?
Sure, yeah. Please feel free to write me an email. It's my name, damian.miller@orbenergy.com. So that's Damian spelled with an A, not with an E, because there are two different ways to spell it. So damian.miller@orbenergy.com. Great.
Well, Damian, we thank you again for being here and wish you every success in the great work that you're doing.
Thank you very much. It's really, I really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you for having me on your program.
Thank you. And now let's do some good.